Please welcome General Raymond.
Well, good morning. And Jim and Bill, what an honor it is to represent the Space Force at the FY22 Defense Program Conference. And on behalf of all the Guardians and the civilians assigned to the United States Space Force, let me begin by thanking you for allowing us to be here today and talk a little bit about the Space Force, hopefully prime the pump for good Q&A post my remarks. You know, the United States of America is a spacefaring nation, and we have long understood that our nation is strongest economically, militarily, and diplomatically when we have access to and freedom to maneuver in space. You know, in 1958, then Senator Lyndon Johnson remarked that there is something more important than any ultimate weapon, and that is the ultimate position, the position of total control over Earth that lies in space. Whoever gains that ultimate position gains control over the Earth for the purposes of tyranny or for the service of freedom. In that same year, the Explorer 1 satellite, our nation's first, launched from what is now known as Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It took engineers and scientists longer than they had anticipated to have indications of that successful launch, and they were rightfully nervous. As a country, we were behind, and we were chasing then the Soviet Union, who had launched Sputnik just 4 months earlier. Competition between great powers during the Cold War spawned the first golden age of space. And through innovation, commitment, and courage to take bold action, we emerged as the global leader in space. And we're that global leader today. Today, we've entered a second golden age, an era defined by rapid global growth in space commerce, exploration, and military activities. This is an incredibly exciting and important time to be in the space business. There is an expansive spirit of exploration and experimentation tempered by the urgency of competition and the new potential for conflict. Space is infused into every facet of our daily lives, and even though it may not be readily apparent, the Space Force has a strong and daily connection with nearly every American citizen. GPS enables people and goods to move efficiently, and is estimated that $1 billion a day of U.S. economic activity depends on it. Precision timing signals, synchronized clocks on smartphones enable global financial networks and optimize the performance of critical infrastructure. Real-time weather, traffic, and news is beamed from space to our fingertips. And 24/7, 365 days a year, our missile warning sensors provide an unblinking eye, protecting the homeland and our forces around the globe. Space underpins everything that we do as a country. It grows our economy, it bolsters our diplomacy, it inspires explorers and innovators of all ages. And from a military perspective, space is the ultimate high ground, offering an unmatched and global perspective. Today, America's security and prosperity, our way of life, and our confidence and peace all depend on our strength in space. But for the past 3 decades, we have had the absolute luxury of taking freedom to maneuver and access to as a granted. That's not the case today. We've integrated space at the operational level since Operation Desert Storm back in the 1991 timeframe, and it has provided our forces an incredible advantage. However, our adversaries and competitors have had a front row seat and have watched us integrate to great effect, and they see that advantage and they don't like what they see. And while we are in the lead, we have to go faster. Our competitors are narrowing our superiority gap. As the National Defense Strategy and the newer interim national security strategy identified, both China and Russia continue to develop space capabilities for their own use. And they are building weapon systems specifically designed to deny us the benefits we derive from the domain. Broadly, these threats include robust jamming of GPS and communication satellites, directed energy systems that can blind, disrupt, or damage our satellites, anti-satellite weapons, both in space and from the ground, designed to destroy U.S. satellites, and cyber capabilities that can attack our ability to control satellites. The scope of the threat, when coupled with how absolutely critical space is to our nation, was a clear call to organize, train, and equip a service of professionals who are experts on the domain and ready to protect it, just like we do in every other warfighting domain. Let me be clear, we do not want to get into a conflict that begins or extends into space. We want to deter that from happening. The best way I know to deter is to do so from a position of strength. To preserve the peace, you have to be ready to win. We are today, and we will be in the future. Today, space power is a central element of our modern military strength, and our capabilities are a cornerstone of deterrence, not just in space, but in every single domain of warfare. The force design of every service in our military is built around the assumption that space is there and will always be there. That is not the case today. We can't assume that away. Without spaces, our forces abroad, security at home, and our allies everywhere are at much greater risk. If we lose space, America loses. Thankfully, the United States seized on the opportunity to adapt and make needed change to stay ahead of this growing threat. And I'm pleased to report that with the establishment of the Space Force, we are better postured today to meet the challenges that we face than we were just a mere 17 months ago, just prior to our establishment. We've been moving at speed to secure an enduring advantage, and American leadership is resonating globally. Our closest allies are following our lead and elevating space in their militaries. We have purpose-built a force tailored for a unique operating environment. We've slashed bureaucracy at every level, empowering Guardians to go fast and take initiative at every echelon. We wrote our first doctrine, which clearly articulates an independent value of space power to the joint and coalition forces. We've expanded powerful partnerships, sending a strong signal that cooperation will continue to be the hallmark of American activities in space. And today, our international partnerships are stronger than they've ever been, and they're growing. Finally, we have created a new development process, from force design and requirements to acquisition and testing, all enabled and accelerated by the digital thread. Now that we have built this service, we are driving unity of effort across the department to move at speed. We have set conditions to outpace emerging and dynamic threats and create new military options by working with the Joint Force Interagency, commercial industry, and our partners and allies. The Space Force is leading a once-in-a-generation overhaul of how multi-domain capabilities are generated, connected, and presented to offer the nation, our Joint Force commanders, new options across the spectrum of competition and conflict. Together with industry, we must set a new pace for military innovation in space and exceed a standard for security in the domain. Today, space accounts for just 2% of the entire DoD budget. That 2% underwrites the design of the entire joint force. The DoD cannot afford, nor does it have the time, to build a joint force that can win without space. The growing threat demands balancing investments across four broad areas. First, we have to defend the architecture that we rely on today. Secondly, we have to shift to a more defendable architecture. Third, we must develop offensive capability to be able to deny benefits and impose costs on our adversaries. And finally, the Space Force has to look at what other missions should go to space now that technology allows it to do so and launch costs have gone down, where we can do it more effectively and efficiently. Our top near-term priority is to provide assured space capabilities to the Joint Force, our nation, and our coalition partners, and modernize to be more survivable in this increasingly contested domain. Missile warning capabilities need to evolve into defensible and survivable architectures, while also ensuring the ability to find, fix, and track emerging threats. We need to modernize across the entire GPS architecture to deliver assured PNT capabilities in denied environments. Our command and control capabilities must continue to grow to become capable of linking sensors and shooters across multiple domains. And to meet the full set of national security space launch requirements, we must continue to competitively invest in domestic launch providers and make targeted investments in orbital transfer, on-orbit servicing, digital engineering, and novel propulsion technologies. It's no surprise we have to do better, do it faster, and meet a lower price point. That's why we were established, and we are seizing the generational opportunity that we've been given. The Space Force is redesigning our capability development ecosystem for speed, unity of effort, and lower costs. Our Space Warfighting Analysis Center is leading analysis, modeling, wargaming, and experimentation to generate new operational concepts and force design options for the department. These concepts will also make it easier to leverage commercial space and to leverage international partners. In the summer of 2021, the Space Force will stand up Space Systems Command to streamline acquisition processes, increase decision speed, expedite capability development, and cut costs. By aligning traditional acquisition, disruptive acquisition, and commercial acquisition, the Department of the Air Force can assess best-of-breed solutions and achieve unity of effort through this Program Integration Council that we've pulled together and the Space Acquisition Council that was mandated in law. And the Senior Acquisition Executive for Space will increase accountability and accelerate decision making. We're making rapid progress, but it's just the beginning and there's a lot of hard work to do. We cannot innovate at speed on our own. Rapid and cost-effective modernization will require a closer, more fused relationship with industry to secure advantage our needs. And for your time today, to put it simply, space power has changed the character of war, and it is a vital component of the world's foremost nation. The United States will not rest. This is an important step to ensure we never fall behind, that we never again have to play catch-up in space. Guardians are rising to the challenge to preserve and advance security, prosperity, and discovery, and freedom in its highest frontier. Again, Jim, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I really hope that primes the pump for a good Q&A session.
Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. How are you? Thanks for letting me be here.
Oh, of course.
Not surprising to find Dr. LaPlante here, is it, sir?
It's always good to see Dr. LaPlante.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, General Raymond. So, you know, all of us, when we read the history books, think about what was it like during World War II when the mobilization, what was it like during going to the moon, what was it like during ICBM beginnings or the Polaris beginnings. This is what's happening right now in space with this gentleman here. It is that time in history. It's remarkable. So thank you so much for what you're doing and where you are. We're going to start with a question from Andy Twomey from Mantech, excuse me. Andy. Andy, you're muted.
There he is. I see him.
No, I'm present. You hear me now?
We got you.
Okay, great. You mentioned in your remarks, you talked about the transformation of SMC to the Space Systems Center and transformation in the requirements process. Could I ask you to elaborate on that a little bit? It appears from the outside that you're asking it to perform an increased role in the determination of requirements, an increased role of the network, and potentially it's an organization driving your vision of transformation to the first digital service.
Yeah, so we just published just a week ago, or last week, our first vision for a digital service. Our expectation is when we establish this service that we are going to build this from the ground up as a digital service. So all the things that we're doing are enabled by this digital vision. We've got work to do. We've laid out the vision, we've made some initial progress, and we understand that it will provide value. I'm not here to say it's done, but we've laid out the path and I'm comfortable with where we are on that. I actually look at the capability development as an ecosystem, and it's not just one organization. It starts with force design. And so we established an organization called the Space Warfighting Analysis Center. It's led by a gentleman named Andrew Cox. They are doing the force design work to figure out what that force structure needs to look like. How do you make that more defendable? How can you build that force design, do it digitally, and enable more partnerships and more effective partnerships with commercial industry and our allied partners, which I think are two critical opportunities that we have ahead of us. After you do force design, then you get into the requirements business, and our S5 staff on the space staff at the Pentagon is leading that requirements work. That's service chief business, and we're working that requirements. We're working with General Hyten, the head of the JROC, the vice chairman who leads the JROC, to help be the use case, if you will, to help drive change across that JROC process. And we're already beginning to see advances and opportunities there as well. After you do that, then it shifts to acquisition. And we've updated or refined the acquisition structure to bring unity of effort across the department, delegate more authorities down to the lower level. We've diversified the PEO structure. I think, Bill, when you were there was one PEO for everything that was done in space.
Yep.
And today we've diversified that. We've pushed authorities that used to be held at the Pentagon and now have placed them in Los Angeles with the acquirers. We're already seeing benefits of that. We've aligned the Space Rapid Capabilities Office, the Space Development Agency when it comes in October of 22, and the Air Force Research Lab, which we've adjusted as well to be more effectively focused on space, all aligned with this SSC to be able to move at speed. And then finally, for the first time ever, we have built a testing architecture on how are we going to test this. We haven't had that in space before. We've designed that. There's still a lot of work to do to build it, but we've got the pieces in place now. We've got the leadership team in place, and I'm really excited with the force design work that's going on. It will be a game changer.
Yeah, thank you, General Raymond. I'm going to give a personal shout out to the analytics that Andrew Cox and his team do for space. I mean, we would not be where we are without the analytics that they've done over the last 5 years. Next question is Gus Anderson, from Gus Anderson at Leonardo DRS. Gus. Gus, are you there? Why don't we move on then? How about to Deborah Factor from Airbus? Deborah.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am.
Hi, Deborah.
I can see you too.
Oh, even better. Good morning. General Raymond, you had a lot of conversation this morning about the role of the international allies as you've been gathering them together in the recognition of the role they play in space as a warfighting domain and the importance of working with them to integrate capabilities and counter threats. So industry has a parallel role in this as well as we work on international programs, and the supply chain in space and defense is increasingly global. So what is your vision to make these international partnerships work in a practical way? And what role do you see industry playing in the collaboration, and especially balancing with requirements for jobs and microelectronics and cybersecurity, et cetera? How do you see that balancing and really the collaboration going on both government to government and on an industry playing field?
Yeah, well, first of all, we're in a global domain, just like all other domains, but in our domain, a global domain, we have to have partnerships. We are clearly stronger with those partnerships. Unfortunately, over history, we have not needed the partnerships in space because space was a benign, peaceful domain. We've had partnerships on the civil side of space, but not as strong on the national security side. That is changing in a big way. Since we established the Space Command in August of 2019 and Space Force a couple months later in December, France, the UK, Australia, and Japan have all elevated space across their departments. And what we have, the partnerships that we've had enjoyed over the last decade or so have largely been one-way partnerships. It's one-way giving data to our partners and not a lot of two-way benefit. That has changed completely. And so we're operating together, we're exercising together, we're wargaming together, and now for the first time, we're actually developing capabilities together. We had a requirement to build 2 satellites that were going to cover the northern part of the globe, and rather than build 2 satellites, Norway was already building satellites. So we said, why don't we just take our payloads and put them on their satellites? Saved us almost $1 billion, over $900 million. Will get us onto orbit 3 years sooner than we would have because we don't have to build the satellite now. Same thing with Japan. We're putting hosted payloads on Japanese satellites as well. And I would also tell you we're doing a lot of work in C2 and doing that collaboratively with our partners. And so we've stood up a software factory that is developing capabilities that are already now in place on our operation centers floors, and we have also put those in the operational floors around with our closest partners, in the Australian SPOC, the Canadian SPOC, the UK SPOC is an example. And so there's great benefit to be had here. And as we do this force design, we're building this force design to be coalition friendly from the front so we can leverage more of this. Commercial has a critical role in this. And I would also tell you, so does civil. And so as we build this more fused relationship with commercial industry and we continue to enhance our partnerships with NASA, I think this is another area where we all have partners and we can leverage each other's partnerships to great advantage.
So
Thanks.
thank you, Deborah. And just a comment, as somebody who worked on the Software Defense Science Board study or co-chaired it, to hear the head of Space Command talk about software factories is incredible. So next is our good friend, Jamie Morin, or the Honorable Jamie Morin from Aerospace. Jamie?
Hello. Thanks,
There he is.
Chief, for joining us today and for everything you are doing. And Jim and Bill, appreciate you guys hosting. Jim, I would say the parking was easier this year, but the breakfast wasn't nearly as good.
Don't worry, sir. It'll be in person again by March 9th of next year, sir. Parking will be hell, I guarantee you.
Chief, we heard before you spoke this morning from two senior members of Congress talking about the legislative landscape. And in those two talks, we heard about some significant shortfalls and challenges facing both the Navy and the Army. I'm wondering, what do you see as the newest or the impending future ways that space capabilities can make our joint force more effective? You mentioned 2% of the budget and the whole joint force depending on it. Can we do even more leveraging at the same time that you're working to build that more defensible architecture? And do you see the Space Force fielding those space capabilities themselves? Do you see them buying them from the commercial sector? Or do you see leaving some of that still to the other services where they see niche applications of space capabilities for their mission?
Yeah, so thanks. And it's good to see you again. And thanks for all your continued leadership and support. As I mentioned in my opening comments, our number one priority is to provide capabilities to our joint and coalition partners. That's why we come to work every day. Unfortunately, we can't just focus on that. You also have to be able to make sure that you can now protect and defend those capabilities. But we are all in on providing those capabilities and to actually do the force design that allows us to focus on capabilities more than just providing the defense of those because of the way that we architect that design. A couple key areas where I think the Space Force will continue to grow. Historically, the ISR business has not been something that Air Force Space Command or the Space Force now has done. That's largely been an intelligence community effort. Now, I really believe as satellites and technology is getting smaller, or smaller satellites are becoming more operational relevant, and as launch costs goes down, there's a role here for the Space Force in tactical level ISR. And so we're working with the intelligence community to do this and do it in a way that is complementary, doesn't compete with it. But I really believe this is an area that we'll begin to migrate to because we can do it and we can do it in a way that doesn't break the bank and is focused on our joint and coalition partners. The other area, a couple years ago, one of the big programs, things that came out of the Air Force POM was to look at how do you do the JSTARS mission in a way that isn't tied to an airplane that can't get into an environment that is a contested environment. And so the Air Force now the Space Force has a program that we're building GMTI from space. And so you will see that's another area where we're actively working to be able to provide that capability.
Thank you,
Thanks
Joan.
very much.
And I'm sorry, and one,
Go ahead.
if I could, and on how we're going to do that, I would say we're going to do that the full spectrum of options that you laid out. We're going to leverage and try to leverage commercial more than we've done in the past. We're going to try to have a strong partnership between our force and commercial, and so that full spectrum of options that you laid out will use the whole thing and drive competition.
And a silly question, sir, are there any programs in particular, I apologize, that as you do the space GIMT mission or the space tactical ISR, that we should start keeping a closer eye on?
Yeah, we do have a space GMTI mission that I'd keep an eye on.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Joe Raymond. Thank you, Jim. And thanks, Jamie, for the great question. Next is from, the next question is from Nathan Strout from C4ISRnet. Nathan, are you there?
Yeah, hi, Nathan Strout with C4ISRnet here. Hey, General. Just want to ask a quick question about Space Systems Command. Last month, you unveiled the plans for your second of 3 field commands that the Space Force is standing up, with the assumption that that's going to be stood up this summer with approval from Congress. What are you able to do in the interim as you're waiting for Congress and the administration to act and approve someone to lead that new field command? What can you do in the interim to help stand that organization up?
Yeah, so we've spent almost a year planning for this, and so we've gone through and have had a lot of outside help helping us think through how do you make this organization as flat as you possibly can be to be able to move at speed. How do you how best to align other disruptive acquisition organizations along with it. We have spent a year doing the work, so we have not just sat back and now waiting for Congress to say, hey, go do this. We have done all the planning, so when it happens, we're up and running on day one. We're waiting for a commander to be nominated and confirmed, and once that happens, we'll make that transition, and then a couple key areas like launch that currently falls under Space Operations Command is going to shift to Space Systems Command. Here's why. We've mandated in a letter a year or so ago, I mandated that by 2025, all of our launches off of our ranges are going to be autonomous. Allows us to have much greater throughput on the range, be able to do launches at speed, and to reduce launch costs, range costs of that launch significantly. And so the operational part of that really goes away because it becomes autonomous. And really that launch mission is the partnership with our launch providers on doing mission assurance things that is a Space Systems Command function. And so we'll, once that commander is nominated and confirmed, we'll establish that field command. We'll shift alignment of capabilities over and do some other internal maturing, if you will, as we stand this up. But it's all planned, and that's what we've been working on. We have not just been sitting back twiddling our thumbs.
Thank you, Joe Raymond. Thank you, Nathan. Greg Conrad from Jefferies. Greg?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
sir.
can.
Perfect. Thank you. You mentioned a lot about the importance of the launch vehicle industry, which seems very important to the mission, particularly around bringing down costs. When you think about new competitors on the smaller side of launch, how are you thinking about integrating, these new competitors and taking on risks with maybe some of the unproven solutions?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it all begins with force design. Today, the way our force structure is designed, you can't take risks. There's very small numbers of satellites that are very exquisite, they're very expensive, and they're not very defendable. And so that drives a risk calculus that says we can't take risk. If you change the force design that that is not the design of which I just described, and you have something coming off of an assembly line, so if something fails today, it doesn't matter because I've got another one coming off the assembly line in an hour or a week or even a month, that changes that calculus. Also, the smaller satellites provide for a smaller launch vehicle or multiple satellites being launched on a launch vehicle. We are really working hard to encourage a small launch industry. We've got contract mechanisms, I think, where we have 8 small contracts, small companies or companies that have small launch vehicles that we can reach via contract. We are working partnerships with our international partners on this as well. And I really believe this is an area that's ripe for growth, and you're going to see us take advantage of this in the years ahead.
Thank you. And just what Joe Raymond just said, which a lot of times is missed on folks when they talk about reforming and towards agile launch. It's got to be in the context of the force structure itself. And hot production lines itself is a space resiliency.
Right.
That's the fundamental thing there. Teresa Hitchens, excuse me, Breaking Defense. Hello, Teresa? Okay, we're going to move on to...
Hi there. Sorry, I couldn't get unmuted.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Times.
Please go ahead.
Hi, General Raymond.
Hi,
Nice
Teresa.
to see you again.
Good to see you again.
My question is going back to the issue of ISR and buying commercial from the Space Force. The Army has expressed interest in buying its own ISR capabilities, small satellites. It's doing experiments right now, as I'm sure you know. How do you sort of balance between the services needs, or what they see as their own organic needs, and what you're planning to do in future in this arena from the Space Force? Can you talk about that? Have you talked to the Army about this?
Yeah, so we've as I've mentioned previously, as we establish the Space Force, we are not into breaking the other services. This is to be value added, not subtracting. So the first year we worked very closely with the Air Force to determine which capabilities should transfer over from the Air Force into the Space Force, and we've done all that work. Over the last year, we have done that work now with the Army and the Navy, and we've come to an agreement on what capabilities should transfer from the Navy and from the Army into the Space Force. It's those areas where it will increase readiness of both services and the Joint Force, will save some costs, and will allow us to develop our people in a way that is more effective. Those decisions have all been made. We're now working with those services to put the plan in place, and by law, the Secretary of Defense has to notify Congress before we make that shift. On the people side, you can't order people to come over to the Space Force. They have to volunteer. I will tell you, we don't have to order anybody. We are getting volunteers coming out of the woodwork that want to join the Space Force. I think this is one of the big wins of establishing a Space Force. We are getting just for example, we're going to bring 32 people into the Space Force from other services this year just to test out our processes to make sure that we could do it well and effectively. We had over 3,800 applicants for those 32 positions. We've got significant numbers of people knocking on our door that want to come in. On the ISR piece specifically, as we grow our ISR capability, I'm hoping that all the other services will look to us because we'll be able to do it more effectively and be value added. If not, then the Army needs to continue doing what they do. And so we'll see how that matures as time goes on. But we've come to agreement with both the Army and the Navy on what comes in over. I'm very comfortable with what we've agreed to. I think it's going to deliver advantage.
Okay,
Thank you.
So I'm going to inject a question on behalf of the Acquisition Nerd Nation, which I'm part of. You want to, General Raymond, can you talk about the Service Acquisition Executive position and the timeline for that, filling that, and organizational issues with that, where that's at?
We absolutely need an independent Service Acquisition Executive for space. It was in law when we established the Space Force, the National Defense Authorization Act that established the Space Force back in December of 2019 stated that we'll have a separate SAE. The law says that separate SAE will come into effect on 1 October of 22. We're ready to do that now. We need to accelerate that timeline. It should be no later than 1 October of 22. We've got to get that up and running. You are the acquisition expert, but here's how I think about it in my mind. And I relate it to buying a house or selling a house. And if you decide that you want to save some dollars and you want to use the realtor of either the seller or the buyer of what you're dealing with, you're getting somebody that's working for them and also working for you. I want somebody that comes to work every day focusing on what we need to do in space to be able to move at speed, and I would encourage that to happen sooner rather than later.
Thank you, General Raymond. So back to the question, I have a question, there's a question for Tara Kopp from Defense One. Tara?
Hi, General Raymond, Tara Kopp, Defense One.
Yeah,
good to see you again.
Good to see you.
So I wanted to follow up on Teresa's question. In your agreement with the Army, will the Army be maintaining its low Earth orbit satellites? And what's the risk to the success of the Space Force if the services are maintaining their own inherent satellite capabilities? I thought the the purpose of this was to kind of centralize everything and, have one purveyor of satellite capabilities for everybody. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah, so I would just say right today, as I mentioned in the answer to the question up front, we're not in the ISR business. That's not been a mission area of the DoD or Air Force under, Space Command under Air Force, or today with the Space Force. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, there's kind of 4 priorities that you have to balance. 1, you got to operate the capabilities you have, and you need to be able to protect those capabilities. 2, you have to shift to a new architecture. 3, you have to develop an offense. And 4, you have to look at what other things should go to space and what are those roles of the Space Force. I believe this ISR is an emerging capability that we need to get into as satellites become smaller and more operationally relevant. We've got to mature that, and once that's mature, I think then we can make those future decisions. In the meantime, that's what we're focusing on.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, General Raymond. Next question, Frank Wolf, Rotor and Wing Magazine. Frank? I don't hear Frank. Okay, well, we're gonna ask another question.
Oh, hey, I'm sorry.
Go
I
ahead,
got it. Yeah, hi. I just wanted to ask about the Atlas Space Domain Awareness effort and to replace SPADOC and sort of the lessons learned from JMS and why you're confident that I guess that Atlas can get up and running by spring of next year.
So first of all, it's a great question, and I'm extremely confident that this is going to produce, and in fact, it's already producing. If you remember the JMS program was broken into 3 increments. Yeah. The first one was putting a visualization tool on SPADOC. The second one was getting off of SPADOC, and the third one was actually building the battle management command and control capabilities that you needed to do, to handle that space has become a warfighting domain. We had not done any work on battle management command and control. So JMS increment 1 was up and running. JMS increment 2 was, I think, broken into 3 or 4 service packs, something like that, and the first one was up and running. Couldn't get the second one done. It was completely holding what we needed to get to on battle management command and control hostage. And so back in probably 2017 or 18 timeframe, we killed JMS, and we shifted to a rapid development capability and stood up this software factory to be able to do it. It's already delivering results.
Wow.
It has already, we are delivering battle management command and control capabilities as we speak. We've built software capability development teams that are embedded at the CSPOC with the 18th Space Control Squadron. I was just out there a month or so ago. The work to get off of SPADOC is on track, and I'm very confident that we've done that. In fact, I'm so confident that the work that we've done has really become the centerpiece of the JADC2 effort. If you look at ABMS, the Space Force data architecture that was built to do the space domain awareness work and the Space C2 is the data infrastructure for ABMS. We've delivered a C2 system for critical space capabilities that was built for us by the RCO. And so it is already delivering, and that decision we made to go from how we used to do acquisition under JMS to our new way is already paying significant dividends.
Yeah. Thank you, Frank, and thank you, General Raymond. We're going to circle back. I'm told that Gus Anderson, Gus from Leonardo DRS, you're on. Gus, do you want to ask your question? Gus? Well, while we're waiting for Gus, let me ask the general question. From the outside, it's hard to tell, but can you comment on how are we doing on speed? How is the Space RCO doing in your mind? What kind of, where are we at there?
I'm also very pleased with the Space RCO's progress. If you recall, the law when we established the Space Force said, take what used to be the ORS office and I think rename it or something into this. We didn't rename it. We completely re-architected it to mirror the Air Force Rapid Capability Office. In just a very short period of time, they've built the office. They've got numerous programs that they're working. They've slashed the timelines to go through the requirements process significantly. In fact, when the law was passed, it said the Space RCO was exempt from JSIDs.
Wow.
And so they are moving at speed. Now, they're still new and haven't yet delivered a capability because of where they are in the stand-up. But I was just out there a month or so ago, and I was completely impressed. And what we have seen, where they are in the life cycle of those programs, they have slashed timelines considerably.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And generally, how are we doing on speed, separate, even outside of the RCO? I know we've done, like on the follow-on the SIBRs, they used the mid-tier acquisition. How are those things going, and what do you still need to? What still needs to be sped up in your view?
Yeah, so the mid-tier acquisition authorities that we have has actually helped us considerably. What it allows you to do, and this is a student teaching the professor here because I am not in the acquisition community, but what it allows us to do is do prototyping faster and to buy down risk of a program. So if you look at our next generation OPIR program, we have met the milestones and are on cost targets for that program. The only way we could have done that was to use those mid-tier acquisition authorities that allowed us to do prototyping, buy down that risk, and so far we're on track.
That's great. We're going to try one more time for Gus, and then we're going to say we're 3 strikes, you're out. Gus, are you on?
I see Duncan McNabb. Is that General McNabb?
Yeah.
Why not? Let's jump to.
Yeah, General McNabb. Do you have a question, General McNabb? No, we have that. Maybe he's on mute as well.
He's muted himself. A silly question, sir, and I apologize for. I know publicly your position is always that your service is least understood because of the classification levels, right? Is it? Do you believe you're making common strides with the American public, really trying to connect with the wheat field and the wheat field farmer in Oklahoma, about what you're bringing to the China fight?
Yeah, I think it's actually more than just classification. I think space is largely invisible. You know, the only thing that Americans can see largely of space is a launch. That's the only thing that's really visible. Once the satellite's on orbit, it's really hard to have that connection. And so we are working very hard to be able to describe to the American public on just how important space is, not just to our military, but to them personally. And in fact, if you look at all the other services, there's no other service that has a stronger connection to the average American than the Space Force.
Yeah.
I mean, look at how GPS enables our American way of life. Look at what you get out of weather. Look at what you get out of communication satellites. I mean, that link is direct and used almost continuously throughout the day. And so we've got work to do to tell that story. Space is a huge force multiplier, I go back to what I learned in Air Command and Staff College as an airman. And this is with the world's best Air Force, at the time in World War II. 1,000 bombers would go after one ball-bearing factory target.
Yes, sir.
1,000 bombers. 9 bombs on each bomber. 9,000 weapons going after one target. And on a good day, again, with the world's best Air Force, no close second across the world, about 100 would hit within a half mile of the target. Look at what happens today with one B-2 bomber, with multiple weapons, all independently targeted and all perfect strikes. Well, how do you do that? You do that by integrating space. What if space wasn't there? Does the Air Force have 1,000 bombers in its inventory?
No.
It doesn't. No. And so if you look at what we're spending in space and you look at the force multiplier, that's just one example. Every service, every joint war plan, every defense agency assumes, their force structure assumes that access to space. And that's why this is so critical.
Yes, sir.
So, General, I have a question about what we used to call developmental planning, which I know capability planning, development, which you alluded to earlier. What I recall is back in about 2015 when Claude Bolton, the late Claude Bolton, and Paul Kaminsky did a study of us in the Air Force. They found that other than in the space arena, we had largely gotten away from developmental planning in the Air Force, and we needed to reinvigorate it. Do you want to? But space was different. When you talk about where that is today, what we used to call developmental planning, which is the combination of analysis, prototyping, understanding requirements before you have a requirement, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say we still have work to do, but this capability development process that we built is trying to address that from the start, and it starts at the beginning with this force design. And as I highlighted and you echoed, the analytical work that's being done out at what used to be SSDP, which still exists, and now the Space Warfighting Analysis Center is the thing that provides the foundation of that work. And if we do this right, and you do it all digitally with a digital thread, you then take that same thread from force design into requirements, into acquisition, into testing, and then into training our operators. And we think we can do that at speed. It all begins with this force design work. That's the most important work we're doing right now in our service, is getting that force design right. It's going to enable us to use commercial industry and our allied partners much more significantly than what we can do today with our current force design. And I think it's going to accelerate our ability to move at speed and at cost.
Thank you. And just as an editorial comment, we mentioned earlier, you mentioned about the Andrew Cox's organization. A lot of the justification, I think, that the Hill and the appropriators and the authorizers had for increasing the space budget was driven by the credibility of those analytics.
Right.
So this is so important for.
I think that I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think you have to have the analytical underpinnings to make those decisions. I think the other thing that has really helped us is the partnerships that we enjoy with the intelligence community today. They're the best that it's ever been. And what I have found is when we come in together with the National Reconnaissance Office, it's pretty hard to beat. When we come in fragmented, it's hard to get a decision. I think two things: the analytical rigor, which is largely been an SSDP, Space Security and Defense Program effort, which is a dual NRO, at the time Air Force Space Command, now Space Force Office, and the close partnership between us and the intel community has really advanced our game.
Thank you, John.
And then one last question, sorry, to end on a high note. I know you're out of time. I know you're on a tight schedule today.
It's all good.
You have more time?
I can be here all day.
Oh, fantastic,
I love
sir.
this conversation.
That was a terrible thing to say.
Although the light's turning red.
That's okay, sir.
You're giving me the hook.
It's all right, sir. We'll figure out how to turn that light off. Don't you worry, sir. This is a terrible thing to say. You've been very outspoken about, hey, there is no war in space, there's just war. Mm-hmm. And the concept is to make sure, to deter, to make sure it does not extend into space, because everything will complete destruction at that point in time. It is deterring, assuming we're moving to a China fight, is deterring the China fight different? Because just operationally, it seems to me, and maybe this is completely off the mark, that any sort of a fait accompli type activity would be based on doing everything possible to blind and disrupt U.S. communications, whether it's ISR, whether it's communications, whether it's navigation. Does the burden to deter in a China fight, is that something that would even be higher than you'd normally see like in a Russia fight, like a Yukon fight?
I think, so what I would say is, the way I look at it is, just as I've been outspoken saying there's no such thing as a space war.
Yes,
There's
sir.
war that either begins or extends into space. I would also say there's no such thing as space deterrence. I think it's deterrence. And I think space has a piece of that integrated deterrence concept.
Yes, sir.
To where we can help amplify that calculus. I think also when you look to deter, you have to, it's all about changing the deterrence calculus of an adversary. And it's denying benefits and imposing costs. And I think you have to look at, as you mentioned in your question, the China piece. If it was somebody else, you have to take that situation and that country and why they are going to conflict to begin with into consideration as you develop the deterrence strategy to be able to deter that. And so
Yes,
I'm not a big fan of the term space deterrence either, just the same as space war. I think it's integrated deterrence. I think we have a piece of it. And our goal is to, I'm convinced, I'm absolutely convinced, if you look at what both China and Russia are building for weapon systems, I'm convinced that we're going to have to fight for space superiority in the future if deterrence were to fail. And so that's why this is absolutely so important And I'm convinced if we can deter conflict from beginning or extending into space, then we have a really strong chance of deterring conflict from spilling over into other domains, because it's an integrated view of deterrence.
Well spoken.
Thank you.
Well spoken. General, we're delighted to have you today.
Thank you very much.
That was a brilliant discussion, sir.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Nicely done.
Thanks very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Jay. Awesome.
I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thanks
Thank you
for all
so
your
much.